The desert sun beat down mercilessly on forward operating base Chapman as Sergeant Marcus Rivera cleaned his M4 carbine for what he hoped would be one of the last times. 37 days. That's all that stood between him and the flight home to Chicago, between him and Elena's arms, between him and meeting his unborn daughter for the first time. "You're gonna wear that thing down to nothing if you keep cleaning it like that," came a familiar voice behind him. Marcus looked up to see his best friend and fellow sergeant, Tommy Walsh, approaching with 2 steaming cups of what passed for coffee at the FOB. "Just making sure she's ready for tomorrow's patrol," Marcus replied, accepting the cup gratefully. The liquid was bitter and lukewarm, but it was caffeine, and that's all that mattered after another sleepless night. Tommy settled down beside him on the wooden crate that served as their makeshift bench. At 26, Tommy was 2 years younger than Marcus, but his boyish face and constant jokes made him seem even younger. They'd grown up 3 blocks apart in Pilsen, Chicago's little village, and had enlisted together right after high school. Now, after 3 deployments, they were both ready to hang up their uniforms. "Elena send any new pictures?" Tommy asked, nodding toward the worn photograph Marcus kept taped inside his helmet. Marcus smiled, pulling out his phone to show the latest ultrasound image. "Doctor says she's healthy. Due date still October 15th. I should be back in time." "Should be?" Tommy raised an eyebrow. "Brother, you're leaving in 37 days whether Uncle Sam likes it or not. Your ETS date is set in stone. ETS, expiration term of service." Marcus had been counting down to that date for months. September 3rd, 2023, the day he would officially become a civilian again. The day he could start building the life he'd dreamed about during those long, hot nights on guard duty. "You know what I'm going to miss most about this place?" Tommy said, taking a sip of his coffee and immediately grimacing. "The 5-star accommodations? The gourmet cuisine?" Marcus gestured around at the dusty base with its prefab buildings and blast barriers. "Nah, man. I'm going to miss having someone to watch my 6 24/7. Civilian world's different. Everyone's looking out for themselves." Marcus understood. The brotherhood they'd found in the army was unlike anything in civilian life. These men had become his family, bound together by shared hardships, mutual dependence, and the knowledge that any one of them would lay down their life for the others without hesitation. A voice crackled over the base's PA system. "All personnel assigned to Bravo Squad, report to the briefing tent at 1400 hours for tomorrow's patrol assignment." Marcus checked his watch. 1:30 p.m. Time to go. The briefing tent was stifling hot, packed with 12 soldiers sitting on folding chairs around a table, covered with maps and satellite photos. Captain Reynolds, a career officer from Texas with silver hair and intense blue eyes, stood at the front. "Gentlemen, tomorrow's mission is straightforward," Reynolds began, pointing to a spot on the map marked with red ink. "We've got reports of Taliban movement in the village of Kamar, about 20 clicks north of here. Intelligence suggests they're using it as a staging area for attacks on supply convoys." Marcus studied the terrain. Kamar sat in a valley surrounded by rocky hills, perfect sniper country. The kind of place where you couldn't see your enemy until it was too late. "Rules of engagement remain standard," Reynolds continued. "We go in, assess the situation, talk to the village elders, and gather intelligence. This is hearts and minds, people, not seek and destroy. Questions?" Corporal Jenkins, barely 19 and on his first deployment, raised his hand. "Sir, what's our exit strategy if things go south?" "Good question, Jenkins. We've got Apache support on standby and a quick reaction force ready to deploy if needed. But this should be routine. We're not expecting heavy resistance." As the briefing concluded, Marcus felt the familiar knot of anxiety form in his stomach. He'd learned to trust that feeling during his previous deployments. Routine missions had a way of becoming anything but routine in Afghanistan. That evening, Marcus sat in his bunk writing what had become his nightly letter to Elena. He never sent them. Internet access was spotty and phones were expensive. But putting his thoughts on paper helped quiet his mind. "My beautiful Elena, 36 days now until I'm home. I dream about walking through our front door, about holding you, about putting my hand on your belly and feeling our daughter kick. I dream about being the father I never had, about teaching her to ride a bike in Humboldt Park like my grandfather taught me. Tomorrow we've got another patrol. I know I always tell you not to worry, but I need you to know that no matter what happens, you and our baby are my whole world. If something happens to me..." Marcus stopped writing. He'd started and deleted that sentence a dozen times over the past week. What was the point of putting those fears on paper? In 36 days, none of this would matter. He'd be home, safe, starting his new life as a husband and father. He folded the letter and tucked it into his footlocker with all the others. Tomorrow would be just another patrol, just another step closer to home. Outside, the desert wind howled across the base, carrying with it the scent of dust and diesel fuel and something else, something that smelled like change coming. Just the convoy rolled out of Fob Chapman at 0600 hours, 3 armored Humvees cutting through the Afghan morning mist like ghosts. Marcus rode in the second vehicle, watching the barren landscape roll by through bulletproof glass that distorted everything into a greenish hue. "You ever wonder what this place was like before the war?" asked Specialist Davis, a medic from Detroit who joined their unit 6 months ago. He was staring out at the rocky hills that rose on either side of the road like ancient sentinels. "Probably not much different," Tommy replied from the driver's seat. "Hard country breeds hard people. That's just the way it is." Marcus adjusted his body armor and checked his watch. They were making good time. The village of Kamar was still an hour away, but the road was better than expected, recently graded, with only a few potholes that could hide IEDs. His satellite phone buzzed with an incoming message from Elena. "Felt her kick this morning during my coffee. She's going to be a soccer player like her daddy. Love you. Stay safe." Marcus smiled despite the churning in his stomach. Elena had played Division II soccer at DePaul University, where they'd met in a sociology class. She was faster than him, with better ball handling skills, but he'd never tell her that. "Rivera, you copy." Captain Reynolds' voice crackled through the radio. "Copy, sir. We're approaching the village perimeter. Stay sharp, everyone. Remember, this is reconnaissance and rapport building. We're here to help these people, not intimidate them." The village of Kamar appeared gradually as they crested a hill, a cluster of mud brick buildings surrounded by terraced fields where a few goats grazed. Smoke rose from cooking fires, and Marcus could see children playing in the dusty streets. It looked peaceful, almost pastoral, too peaceful. "Something's off," Marcus said into his radio. "Where are all the men?" It was a good observation. In most Afghan villages, the men would be visible working the fields or gathering in the central square for morning tea. Here, Marcus saw only women and children, and even they seemed to be keeping close to the buildings. "Maybe they're just shy," Jenkins suggested, but his voice betrayed his nervousness. The convoy pulled into the village center and parked in a defensive formation. As they dismounted, an elderly man with a grey beard and traditional Pakol hat approached them. He spoke in accented English. "Welcome, American soldiers. I am Malik Abdul Rahman, elder of this village." Captain Reynolds stepped forward and offered the traditional Islamic greeting. "Assalamu alaikum, Malik. We're here to ensure your village's safety and to ask if you need any assistance." The elder's eyes darted nervously toward the hills surrounding the village. "We are grateful for your concern, but we have no troubles here. Perhaps you should continue on your way." Marcus felt his training kick in. The man was scared, not just cautious, genuinely terrified of something. His hands were trembling slightly, and he kept glancing toward a specific building on the village's edge. "Sir," Marcus said quietly into his radio, "I think we need to cut this short. Something's got these people spooked." Before Reynolds could respond, the first shot rang out. The bullet struck the ground inches from Marcus's feet, sending up a spray of dust and gravel. Years of training took over instantly. Marcus dove behind the nearest Humvee as more shots echoed from the surrounding hills. "Contact! Contact! We're taking fire from multiple positions." Reynolds shouted into his radio as the village erupted into chaos. Women screamed, grabbing their children and running for cover. The elderly Malik disappeared into his building, as if the ground had swallowed him whole. More rifle fire poured down from the rocky outcroppings above, the distinctive crack of AK-47s mixing with the sharper reports of precision rifles. "Tommy, you hit!" Marcus called out as he low-crawled toward his friend's position behind the lead vehicle. "Negative, but we're pinned down good. Count at least 4 positions in those hills." Marcus popped up long enough to return fire toward a muzzle flash he'd spotted among the rocks. The engagement was textbook Taliban tactics. Draw the Americans into a village, then rain fire down from the high ground. They'd walked straight into it. "Apache inbound. ETA 10 minutes, Reynolds announced. 10 minutes might as well have been 10 hours in a firefight. That's when Marcus heard it, a voice calling down from the hills in perfect, unaccented English. "Sergeant Rivera, Marcus Rivera from Chicago." The shot stopped abruptly, creating an eerie silence broken only by the ringing in Marcus's ears. How the hell did they know his name? I know about Elena, the voice continued, echoing off the valley walls. I know about your baby girl due in October. Marcus felt his blood turn to ice. Those details weren't in any official records an enemy could access. The due date, Elena's name, that was personal information he'd only shared with his family and closest friends. Who are you? Marcus shouted back, his rifle trained on the source of the voice somewhere in the rocks above. Someone who knows you're going home in 36 days, Marcus. Someone who knows you clean that rifle every morning and think about your daughter. Someone who knows you write letters to your wife every night but never send them. The accuracy was impossible, terrifying. Marcus's mind raced through possibilities. A security breach, intercepted communications, a leak somewhere in the chain of command. But none of that explained the intimate details only he would know. What do you want? Marcus called out. I want you to remember this day, Marcus Rivera. Remember that your war isn't over when you go home. It follows you. It becomes part of you. And someday when you're lying awake at night holding your daughter, you'll wonder if I'm still out here, still watching, still waiting. The psychological warfare was working. Marcus could feel sweat beading on his forehead despite the cool morning air. This wasn't random Taliban harassment. This was personal, targeted, designed to get inside his head. Movement! 2 o'clock! Jenkins called out, and the firefight resumed with renewed intensity. This time, the enemy fire was more accurate, more concentrated. Marcus heard the distinctive whistle of a sniper's bullet pass inches from his ear. These weren't just Taliban fighters. They were trained, disciplined, and they had the high ground. I'm hit! Davis cried out from somewhere behind Marcus. Leg! I'm hit in the leg! Marcus made a split-second decision. Ignoring the bullets chewing up the ground around him, he sprinted toward Davis's position. The medic was lying behind a low stone wall, blood seeping through his pants just above the knee. How bad? Marcus asked, already applying pressure to the wound. Missed the artery, but I can't walk, Davis replied through gritted teeth. You need to get me back to the vehicles. As Marcus prepared to help Davis move, he heard the voice again, closer now. Goodbye, Marcus Rivera. Give my regards to Elena and the baby. The sniper's bullet caught Marcus in the shoulder, spinning him around and slamming him against the stone wall. Pain exploded through his body like white lightning, but he stayed conscious, stayed focused on protecting Davis. Medic down! Rivera's hit! Tommy's voice seemed to come from very far away. The last thing Marcus remembered before losing consciousness was the sound of Apache helicopters approaching, and a child crying somewhere in the village, a sound that would haunt his dreams for years to come. The medical bay at FOB Chapman smelled like disinfectant and fear. Marcus drifted in and out of consciousness, the morphine making everything feel like he was underwater. Voices came and went, doctors discussing his shoulder wound, Tommy arguing with someone about casualty reports, Captain Reynolds debriefing with intelligence officers. The bullet missed the major arteries. Dr. Martinez, the base physician, was saying to someone Marcus couldn't see. Clean entry and exit wound. He'll have limited mobility for a few weeks, but he should make a full recovery. Physical recovery, maybe. But Marcus could already feel something else broken inside him, something that couldn't be fixed with surgery and painkillers. When he finally woke up fully, Tommy was sitting beside his bed, reading a worn copy of Sports Illustrated. The Cubs were having their worst season in decades, according to the cover. Hey, Sleeping Beauty, Tommy said, looking up with relief. Thought you were going to miss all the excitement. What excitement? Marcus's voice came out as a croak. His throat felt like sandpaper. Intelligence thinks they identified our sniper friend, guy named Hamid Karzai, not the president, different Karzai, former Afghan National Army officer who went rogue about 2 years ago. Apparently, he speaks perfect English because he was trained at Fort Benning for 6 months in 2019. Marcus tried to sit up, wincing as pain shot through his shoulder. That doesn't explain how he knew about Eleanor, about the baby. Tommy's expression darkened. Yeah, that's the part nobody wants to talk about. CID is investigating possible security breaches, but so far they've got nothing. Your personal records are clean. Communications monitoring shows no leaks. The Criminal Investigation Division's involvement meant this was serious. If there was a security breach, it could compromise other soldiers' families. What about Davis? Is he okay? He's fine, already back on duty. Says you saved his life. Tommy leaned forward in his chair. Marcus, there's something else. They're fast-tracking your medical discharge. You'll be stateside within the week. What about my ETS date? I've got 35 days left. Not anymore, brother. Medical discharge supersedes everything. You're going home. Home. The word should have filled him with joy, but instead, Marcus felt a strange emptiness. He'd been counting down to September 3rd for months, planning his transition, preparing mentally for civilian life. Now it was all happening too fast, like being thrown into deep water before you're ready to swim. Have you talked to Elena? Tommy nodded. Captain Reynolds called her personally, told her you were wounded but stable, coming home early for medical treatment. She's flying out to meet you at Walter Reed National Military Medical Center in Maryland. Marcus had heard stories about soldiers spending months there, dealing with injuries both visible and invisible. He'd never imagined he'd be one of them. That night, despite the pain medication, sleep wouldn't come. Every time Marcus closed his eyes, he heard that voice echoing off the valley walls. I know about Elena. I know about your baby girl. How was it possible? He went over every conversation he'd had about Elena, every phone call home, every letter he'd written. He'd been careful about operational security, never mentioning specific dates or locations in his communications. Yet somehow this Hamid Karzai had known intimate details about his life. Unless, Marcus sat up in bed, ignoring the pain in his shoulder, unless it wasn't intelligence gathering at all, unless it was just psychological warfare based on educated guesses and publicly available information. Think like a soldier, he told himself. What would Marcus Rivera, Army sergeant from Chicago, likely have waiting for him at home? A wife or girlfriend, statistically probable. A baby on the way, common for soldiers nearing the end of their deployments. The specific names and dates could have been lucky guesses designed to rattle him. But even as he tried to rationalize it, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that there had been something more. The voice had been too confident, too specific, and that final message, give my regards to Eleanor and the baby, had felt personal, almost intimate. 3 days later, Marcus was on a military transport flight to Germany, then another flight to Andrews Air Force Base. His shoulder was immobilized in a sling, and the doctors had given him enough medication to knock out a horse, but his mind was still racing. The other wounded soldiers on the flight were in various states of injury and recovery. Some were missing limbs, others had burns or shrapnel wounds. A few, like the young soldier sitting across from him, had no visible injuries at all. The invisible wounds were sometimes the worst ones. First time heading to Walter Reed? The soldier asked. He looked about 20, with short-cropped blonde hair, and eyes that seemed much older than his face. Yeah, you? Third time. TBI, traumatic brain injury. IED got our convoy outside Kandahar last year. He tapped his temple. Looks fine on the outside, but up here it's like someone scrambled my hard drive. Marcus nodded sympathetically. He'd known soldiers with TBI. The symptoms could be devastating. Memory problems, personality changes, difficulty processing information. Some guys never fully recovered. What about you? The soldier asked. Sniper got me in the shoulder. Should heal up fine. That's good, man. Physical stuff is easier. You can see it getting better. He paused. You got family waiting? Yeah. Wife and a baby on the way. That's good. Family helps. Gives you something to focus on besides... He gestured vaguely at his own head. Besides the noise up there. The noise. Marcus was beginning to understand what he meant. Walter Reed National Military Medical Center looked more like a luxury hotel than a military hospital. Modern buildings, landscaped grounds, and signs everywhere directing visitors to various treatment centers. But underneath the polished exterior, Marcus could sense the weight of human suffering that filled these halls. Elena was waiting for him in the reception area, 8 months pregnant, and more beautiful than he remembered. When she saw him coming through the doors in his wheelchair, hospital policy for incoming patients, she started crying. God, Marcus, when they called, I thought... She knelt down beside the wheelchair and kissed him carefully, avoiding his injured shoulder. I'm okay, baby. I'm okay. But even as he said it, Marcus knew it wasn't entirely true. Physically, yes, he would recover, but something inside him felt fundamentally changed, like a machine with a gear that would never quite fit right again. They'd booked Elena a room at the on-base family housing, and Marcus was cleared to stay with her between his medical appointments. That first night, lying in bed beside his wife for the first time in 8 months, should have been perfect. Instead, Marcus found himself listening to every sound, The hum of the air conditioning, footsteps in the hallway, cars passing outside. "You're not sleeping," Elena whispered in the darkness. "Just adjusting. It's quieter here than I'm used to." She turned to face him, her pregnant belly pressing against his good arm. "Tell me what happened over there." The captain said it was a sniper, but he didn't give me details. Marcus had been dreading this conversation. How could he explain something he didn't understand himself? How could he tell Elena that an enemy fighter had somehow known her name, known about their baby, known intimate details about their life together? "We were on a routine patrol," he began, choosing his words carefully. "Intelligence said there might be Taliban activity in a village called Kamar. When we got there, they were waiting for us." "Were you scared?" "Scared?" Marcus thought about it. "No, not at first. Fear comes later when you have time to think about what could have happened. In the moment, training takes over. You just react. But something's bothering you. I can tell." She knew him too well. Elena had always been able to read his moods, even before they were married. It was one of the things that had attracted him to her in that sociology class at DePaul, her ability to see past surface appearances and understand what people were really feeling. The sniper, he said some things that didn't make sense. What kind of things? Marcus hesitated. If he told her the truth, it would only worry her more. But keeping it secret felt like lying, and he'd promised himself he would never lie to Elena. "He knew about you, about the baby. He called you by name." Elena was quiet for a long moment. When she finally spoke, her voice was steady but concerned. "How is that possible?" "I don't know. The army's investigating, but so far they haven't found any security breaches. It might have just been psychological warfare, educated guesses designed to mess with my head. But you don't think so?" "I don't know what to think." The baby chose that moment to kick, hard enough that Marcus could feel it against his arm. Despite everything, he smiled. "She's active tonight," Elena said. "I think she knows her daddy's home." Marcus placed his hand on Elena's belly, feeling their daughter moving inside. This was what mattered. This was what he'd been fighting for, what he'd survived for. Whatever had happened in that Afghan village, whatever that sniper had known or thought he knew, it was in the past now. "Have you thought about names?" he asked, trying to steer the conversation toward happier topics. "I was thinking, Sophia, after your grandmother." Marcus's grandmother, Sophia, had raised him after his parents died in a car accident when he was 12. She'd worked 2 jobs to keep him fed and clothed, made sure he stayed in school and out of trouble. She'd died just before his first deployment, but not before making him promise to come home safe and build a good life. "She would have loved that," Marcus said. "Sophia Rivera, it has a nice ring to it." They talked for another hour about baby names, about the apartment Elena had found near her parents' house in Pilsen, about Marcus's plans to use his GI Bill benefits to finish his degree. Normal conversations about normal life, the kind he'd dreamed about during those long nights on guard duty. But when Elena finally fell asleep, Marcus lay awake, staring at the ceiling. Tomorrow he would start his medical evaluation and begin the process of transitioning from soldier to veteran. The doctors would assess his physical recovery and probably recommend some counseling to help with the psychological adjustment. What they wouldn't be able to fix was the nagging feeling that his war wasn't really over, that somewhere in the mountains of Afghanistan, Hamid Karzai was still out there, still thinking about Sergeant Marcus Rivera from Chicago, still carrying whatever secrets had allowed him to see so deeply into Marcus's life. "Your war isn't over when you go home," the sniper had said. "It follows you. It becomes part of you." As Marcus finally drifted off to sleep, he wondered if those words had been a threat, a warning, or simply the truth that every combat veteran eventually learns, that some battles continue long after the shooting stops, fought not on foreign battlefields, but in the quiet moments of civilian life, in hospital beds and family rooms, in the space between sleeping and waking where memories and fears converge. Outside, a siren wailed in the distance, and Marcus's eyes snapped open again. It was going to be a long night. Chicago in late September felt like a different planet. After 18 months in the Afghan desert, the humidity hit Marcus like a wall when he stepped off the plane at O'Hare. The sounds were overwhelming: car horns, construction equipment, the constant hum of air conditioning units. Even the smell was different: deep dish pizza, exhaust fumes, and Lake Michigan's muddy sweetness instead of dust and diesel fuel. Elena's parents, Maria and Roberto Gonzalez, were waiting at baggage claim with a handmade sign that read, "Welcome home, Marcus," in glittery letters. Maria immediately burst into tears when she saw him, wrapping him in a careful hug that avoided his still healing shoulder. "Mijo, you're so thin," she said in accented English, holding his face in her hands. "We're going to fix that. I've been cooking for 3 days." Roberto, a quiet man who worked construction for the city, simply nodded and shook Marcus's good hand. "Good to have you home, son." The drive from O'Hare to their new apartment in Pilsen took them through neighborhoods Marcus had known his entire life, but everything seemed subtly wrong. The buildings looked smaller than he remembered, the streets seemed narrower, and there were people everywhere, more people than he'd seen in one place for over a year. "Are you okay?" Elena asked from the passenger seat, noticing how tense he'd become. "Yeah, just a lot to take in." Their apartment was a second-floor walk-up on 18th Street, 3 blocks from the elementary school where Marcus had learned to speak English. Elena had furnished it with help from both their families, mismatched furniture that was functional if not stylish, and a nursery painted soft yellow because they'd wanted to be surprised about the baby's gender. The landlord, Mr. Ramirez, he gave us a good deal because you're military, Elena explained as they climbed the stairs, and your disability payments from the VA should cover most of the rent until you find work. Disability payments. Marcus was still adjusting to that concept. The Army had rated his shoulder injury at 30% disability, which meant a monthly check for the rest of his life. It wasn't much, but combined with his GI Bill benefits, it would help them get started. The apartment was small but clean, with windows that looked out onto the street where kids were playing soccer between parked cars. It should have felt like home. Instead, Marcus found himself automatically noting escape routes, checking sight lines, positioning himself where he could see both the front door and the back exit. "Maria made arroz con pollo," Elena said, unpacking containers from a cooler bag, "and Roberto brought beer. Corona, your favorite." Marcus accepted the beer gratefully, though he noticed his hand was shaking slightly when he lifted it to his lips. The alcohol helped calm his nerves, but it also made him feel guilty. He'd seen too many veterans use drinking as a way to cope with their problems. That first night back in civilian life was harder than Marcus had expected. The bed felt too soft after months of sleeping on a military cot. The silence was oppressive. No generators running, no radio chatter, no sounds of soldiers moving through the base. Every car backfiring on the street below made him reach for a weapon that wasn't there. At 2 a.m., he gave up trying to sleep and went to sit on the fire escape outside their bedroom window. The city stretched out before him, millions of lights twinkling in the darkness. Somewhere out there, people were living normal lives, working regular jobs, raising families, worrying about ordinary things like mortgage payments and their kids' grades. "Can't sleep either?" Marcus turned to see Elena standing in the window, wrapped in the blue robe he'd bought her before his deployment. "Just adjusting," he said, making room for her on the metal platform. She settled beside him, her pregnant belly making the movement awkward. "You know, I used to sit out here when you were deployed, especially on nights when I was worried about you. I'd look up at the stars and wonder if you were looking at the same ones. Probably. Not much else to do on guard duty." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the occasional car pass on the street below. A police siren wailed in the distance, and Marcus felt his muscles tense involuntarily. "Tommy called while you were in the shower," Elena said. "He's back in the States too, gets out next month. He wants to meet up for lunch tomorrow." Tommy. Marcus had been looking forward to reconnecting with his best friend, but he was also nervous about it. Would Tommy understand what he was going through? Would he be dealing with the same adjustment issues, or would he slide back into civilian life like it was the most natural thing in the world? "That sounds good," Marcus said. "It'll be nice to see him. He's not the only one who's been calling. Your cousin Luis wants to get you a job with the city sanitation department. My brother Pablo thinks you should use your GI benefits to become a nurse, and your Aunt Carmen is convinced you should open a restaurant with your military leadership experience." Everyone had plans for his future. Everyone except Marcus himself. "What do you think I should do?" he asked. Elena took his hand, intertwining their fingers. "I think you should take your time. Figure out who you are now, what you want. The GI Bill isn't going anywhere, neither am I." A baby started crying in one of the apartments below them, and Elena instinctively placed her hand on her belly. "Speaking of which, I had another ultrasound while you were at Walter Reed. Want to see the pictures?" She pulled out her phone and showed him the latest images of their daughter. Sophia looked more human now, less like an alien and more like a tiny person with distinct features. "She's beautiful," Marcus said and meant it. "When's your next appointment?" "Thursday. Dr. Morrison wants to see you too if you're feeling up to it." Marcus nodded. He wanted to be involved in everything: doctor's appointments, childbirth classes, picking out baby furniture. He'd missed so much already because of his deployment. He didn't want to miss anything else. As they headed back inside, Eleanor paused at the bedroom door. "Marcus, that thing you told me about the sniper, about him knowing my name." "Yeah? I've been thinking about it and I have an idea. What if it wasn't intelligence gathering at all? What if he was just messing with your head?" "What do you mean?" "Think about it. You're a sergeant, so you've probably been deployed before. You're wearing a wedding ring, so you're married. You look young, so your wife is probably young too, which means there's a good chance she's pregnant, or you're planning to start a family soon. Elena is a common Hispanic name, and you're obviously Latino. October is 9 months after the holidays, when a lot of military couples conceive before deployments." Marcus stared at her. Eleanor had always been smart, but this was brilliant detective work. "So you think he was just making educated guesses?" "I think he was a psychological warfare specialist who knew exactly which buttons to push to get inside a soldier's head, and it worked. It made sense. More sense than any elaborate intelligence operation or security breach. But even as Marcus felt relief wash over him, part of his mind held on to the doubt. The sniper's voice had been so confident, so specific. "Give my regards to Elena and the baby." Still, Elena's theory was logical, reasonable, and holding on to paranoid thoughts about enemy operatives having impossible knowledge wasn't going to help him adjust to civilian life. "You're probably right," he said, kissing her forehead. "Thank you." "For what?" "For helping me think clearly. For being here. For everything." As they settled into bed, Marcus felt more at peace than he had since the firefight in Kamar. Eleanor's explanation made sense. The sniper had been playing mind games, nothing more. There was no ongoing threat, no reason to keep looking over his shoulder. But as he drifted off to sleep, he couldn't quite shake the memory of that voice echoing off the valley walls, or the feeling that somewhere in the world someone was still thinking about Sergeant Marcus Rivera from Chicago. But Tommy looked different in civilian clothes. Without his uniform and combat gear, he seemed smaller somehow, less substantial. He'd lost weight too, and there were new lines around his eyes that hadn't been there before their deployment. They met at a diner on Western Avenue, the same place they used to eat breakfast before school when they were kids. "Man, it's weird being back," Tommy said, stirring sugar into his coffee. "Yesterday I went to Home Depot to buy some screws, and I spent 20 minutes just staring at all the choices. 23 different types of wood screws. In Afghanistan we had one type. Whatever the supply sergeant could scrounge up." Marcus nodded, understanding completely. Choice paralysis was a common problem for returning veterans. After months of having every decision made for them by military hierarchy, suddenly being faced with endless civilian options could be overwhelming. "How's Elena doing? Baby coming soon, right?" 3 weeks, Marcus said, pride evident in his voice. "We're naming her Sophia after my grandmother." "That's beautiful, man. Your abuela would have loved that." Tommy paused, his expression growing more serious. "Listen, I heard some things about what happened at Kamar, about the sniper knowing personal stuff about you." Marcus felt his shoulders tense. "What did you hear?" "CID briefed us before we left. They're still investigating, but they think it might have been a lucky guess. Psychological warfare." Tommy leaned forward. "But Marcus, if there's something you're not telling people, something that's eating at you, you need to talk to someone about it. Elena thinks it was just mind games, educated guesses based on obvious clues. Elena's smart. She's probably right." Tommy studied his friend's face. "But you don't look convinced." The waitress, an older woman with kind eyes and a name tag that read Dolores, refilled their coffee cups. She reminded Marcus of his Aunt Carmen, and for a moment he felt a pang of homesickness for the army, where relationships were simpler and everyone understood the same rules. "I keep thinking about his voice," Marcus admitted. "How confident he sounded, like he really knew me. PTSD can mess with your memory, make things seem more significant than they were. I've been having some issues myself." This was the first time Tommy had admitted to struggling. In all their years of friendship, he'd always been the optimistic one, the guy who could find humor in any situation. What kind of issues? Nightmares. Anxiety. "Yesterday I was at the grocery store, and some kid dropped a jar of pickles. When it shattered, I hit the deck like it was incoming artillery. Tommy laughed, but it sounded forced. The store manager wanted to call an ambulance. I had to explain that I'm a combat veteran, not a crazy person. Are you getting help? VA has me scheduled for counseling next week. They call it readjustment counseling, like we just need to adjust our attitudes and everything will be fine. Tommy's cynicism was new, and it worried Marcus. What about you? You seeing anyone? Not yet. I've got an appointment with a VA psychologist next month. Next month? Marcus, you were shot by a sniper who somehow knew personal details about your life. That's the kind of thing that can really mess with your head. You shouldn't wait a month to talk to someone. Marcus knew Tommy was right, but the idea of sitting in a room with a stranger and talking about his feelings made him uncomfortable. Military culture didn't encourage emotional vulnerability, even among the closest friends. I'm handling it okay. Elena helps. Being home helps. Does it? Really? Tommy's voice was gentle but challenging. Because you look like you haven't slept in a week. You keep checking the exits every time someone walks into this diner, and you've been tapping your foot like you're ready to bolt since we sat down. Marcus looked down at his foot. He hadn't realized he was doing it, but Tommy was right. His leg was bouncing with nervous energy. It's just an adjustment period, Marcus said. But even to his own ears, it sounded like he was trying to convince himself. Listen, there's something I want to tell you, but you can't repeat it to anyone, okay? Tommy glanced around the diner, then leaned closer. After you got hit, after the Apache cleared out the sniper positions, I went up into those hills with a couple other guys to do a sweep. And? We found spent shell casings, couple of blood trails where our guys hit them, but that was it. No bodies, no weapons, no evidence of who these people were. Tommy paused. But we did find something weird. Marcus felt his pulse quicken. What? A photograph. Black and white, looked like it was printed from a computer. It was you and Eleanor at what looked like a picnic or barbecue. You were both laughing. She was wearing a yellow sundress. Ring any bells? Marcus's blood went cold. He did remember that photo. It was from a 4th of July barbecue at Elena's parents' house, just before his deployment. Elena's brother Pablo had taken it and posted it on Facebook. Facebook, he said quietly. What? The photo, it's from Elena's brother's Facebook page. He posted it last summer. Tommy nodded grimly. That's what I was afraid of. Someone did research on you, Marcus. This wasn't random psychological warfare. It was targeted, personal. They knew exactly who you were before that patrol ever left the base. The implications were staggering. If the enemy had access to social media profiles of American soldiers, if they were conducting personal intelligence gathering on individual troops, it meant the war had become more intimate and terrifying than anyone had imagined. Why didn't you tell me this sooner? Because I hoped I was wrong. Because I wanted Elena's explanation to be right. Tommy's expression was grim. But you deserve to know the truth. Someone out there knows who you are, where you live, who your family is. And they wanted you to know they knew. Marcus felt the walls of the diner closing in around him. His breathing became shallow, rapid. The sounds of other customers talking and eating seemed to fade into white noise. Hey, hey, Tommy said, recognizing the signs of a panic attack. Look at me. Breathe. In through your nose, out through your mouth, just like the medics taught us. It took several minutes for Marcus to regain control. When his breathing finally stabilized, he looked up to find Tommy watching him with concern, and Dolores hovering nearby with a glass of water. You okay, honey? She asked in a motherly tone that reminded Marcus so much of his grandmother that he almost started crying. He's fine, Tommy said. Just a little overwhelmed. We're veterans, just got back from Afghanistan. Dolores nodded knowingly. My grandson just got back from Iraq. He has days like this too. She set the water down and squeezed Marcus's shoulder gently. It gets easier, mijo, give it time. After she walked away, Tommy leaned forward again. Marcus, I need you to promise me something. Promise me you'll call the VA today and get that counseling appointment moved up. And promise me you'll be extra careful. Watch your surroundings, vary your routines. Maybe even consider getting Elena to stay with her parents for a while. You really think I'm in danger? I think someone went to a lot of trouble to get inside your head. The question is why. Tommy pulled out his wallet and left money for both their meals. And I think until we know the answer to that question, you need to assume the worst. As they walked out of the diner, Marcus felt like he was seeing his old neighborhood through different eyes. Every parked car could be hiding a threat. Every person on the street could be watching him. The city he'd grown up in suddenly felt like enemy territory. "Tommy? Yeah? That photograph you found, did you turn it in to CID?" Tommy stopped walking and looked at his friend. "That's the thing, Marcus. I tried to. But when I went back to get it, it was gone. Someone had been there before us and cleaned up the scene. Professional job, not a scrap of evidence left behind." As Marcus walked home to his pregnant wife, he realized that his war wasn't just following him. It was already there, waiting for him, woven into the fabric of his civilian life in ways he was only beginning to understand. Sofia Elena Rivera entered the world at 3:47 a.m. on October 12, 2023, 3 days before her due date. She weighed 6 pounds, 11 ounces, and had Elena's dark eyes and Marcus's stubborn chin. The moment the doctor placed her in his arms, Marcus felt something shift inside his chest, a fierce, protective love unlike anything he'd ever experienced. "She's perfect," Elena whispered from the hospital bed, exhausted but radiant. "Look at those little hands." Marcus studied his daughter's face, memorizing every detail. Her tiny fingers wrapped around his thumb with surprising strength, and when she opened her eyes, she seemed to look directly at him with an ancient wisdom that took his breath away. "Hello, Sophia," he said softly. "I'm your daddy. I've been waiting so long to meet you." The next 48 hours in the hospital were a blur of visitors, flowers, and the overwhelming responsibility of caring for a newborn. Elena's parents brought enough food to feed an army. Tommy showed up with a teddy bear wearing a tiny Cubs jersey. Even some of Marcus's old high school friends stopped by, awkwardly congratulating him while trying not to stare at the healing scar on his shoulder. But underneath the joy and celebration, Marcus felt a constant undercurrent of anxiety. Every nurse who entered the room had to be visually identified. Every unexpected sound in the hallway made him tense. When a maintenance worker came to fix the window blind, Marcus positioned himself between the man and his family, his hand instinctively reaching for a weapon that wasn't there. "You're doing it again," Eleanor said quietly during one of Sophia's feeding sessions. "Doing what?" "Watching the door like you're expecting someone to come through it shooting." Marcus forced himself to relax, but it was difficult. The conversation with Tommy had awakened something in him, a hyper-awareness that felt both necessary and exhausting. "I'm just being careful. Marcus, we're in a maternity ward at Northwestern Memorial Hospital. There are security cameras everywhere and a guard at every entrance. Sophia and I are safe." She was right, logically, but logic didn't seem to matter to the part of his brain that had kept him alive in Afghanistan. That part was still scanning for threats, still calculating escape routes, still assuming that nowhere was truly safe. Dr. Morrison, Elena's obstetrician, stopped by on their last morning to check on the baby and clear them for discharge. "Everything looks perfect," she said, examining Sophia with practiced efficiency. "She's feeding well, her reflexes are normal, and her weight is right where we want it." She turned to Marcus. "How are you doing, Dad? Sometimes new fathers have as much trouble adjusting as new mothers." "I'm fine," Marcus said automatically. Dr. Morrison, a woman in her 50s with graying hair and kind eyes, gave him a look that suggested she'd heard that response many times before and didn't believe it. "Marcus is a recent combat veteran," Elena explained. "He's still adjusting to civilian life." "Ah," Dr. Morrison nodded with understanding. "That adds another layer of complexity to new parenthood. Are you getting any support from the VA?" "I have an appointment with a counselor next week." "Good. And Marcus, don't hesitate to ask for help if you need it. PTSD and new parenthood can be a challenging combination, but with proper support you can absolutely be the father your daughter needs you to be." The drive home from the hospital was terrifying. Marcus had insisted on installing the car seat himself, checking and rechecking every strap and buckle. He drove 15 miles below the speed limit, hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles went white. Every car that got too close, every aggressive driver who honked their horn, felt like a potential threat to his family. "Marcus, you're scaring me," Elena said, as they crept along Lakeshore Drive. "Can you please just drive normally? I'm being safe. You're being paranoid. Sophia needs to get home and eat, and at this rate we won't be there until midnight." He knew she was right, but he couldn't make himself speed up. The idea of something happening to Sophia because he'd been reckless was unbearable. Their apartment felt different with a baby in it, smaller, more vulnerable. Marcus found himself checking the locks on both the front door and the fire escape multiple times each night. He installed a security system, just a basic alarm from Home Depot, but it made him feel marginally better. The first week home with Sophia was a mixture of wonder and terror. Marcus had never been around babies much, and everything about caring for her felt monumentally important and potentially dangerous. Was she eating enough? Was that cry normal? Why was she sleeping so much? Why wasn't she sleeping enough? Elena, despite her own exhaustion and recovery, seemed to have natural maternal instincts that Marcus envied. She could tell the difference between Sophia's hungry cry and her tired cry. She could change a diaper in under 30 seconds. She could soothe the baby with a gentle bounce or a soft lullaby. Marcus felt clumsy and inadequate by comparison. His hands, which could field strip an M4 rifle blindfolded, fumbled with tiny buttons and snaps. His voice, which could bark orders that soldiers instantly obeyed, seemed too harsh and loud for lullabies. "You're trying too hard," Elena told him one evening as he struggled to get Sophia to stop crying. "Babies can sense tension, just relax." "How am I supposed to relax when she won't stop crying? What if something's wrong with her?" "Nothing's wrong with her. She's just being a baby." Elena took Sophia from his arms, and within seconds the crying stopped. See? She just needed a different position. Marcus felt like a failure. He'd led men in combat, made life-and-death decisions under fire, survived 18 months in one of the most dangerous places on Earth, but he couldn't comfort his own daughter. That night, after Elena and Sophia were both asleep, Marcus sat on the fire escape again, his laptop open to a Facebook page he'd been avoiding for weeks. The photo Tommy had described, him and Elena at the 4th of July barbecue, was still there, posted by Pablo with the caption, "My sister and her soldier boy enjoying the holiday." The photo had been liked by dozens of people, shared by several family members, and commented on by friends and relatives. Anyone with basic internet skills could have found it within minutes of searching for information about Sergeant Marcus Rivera from Chicago. But finding the photo was one thing. Taking a printed copy to a firefight in rural Afghanistan was something else entirely. That required planning, resources, and a level of personal interest that went beyond routine intelligence gathering. Marcus closed the laptop and pulled out his phone. Despite the late hour, he called Tommy. "Can't sleep either?" Tommy answered on the second ring. "Sophia's finally sleeping, but my brain won't shut down. I keep thinking about that photo." "I've been thinking about it too." I did some digging, called some guys who are still over there. Word is that Hamid Karzai, the sniper, wasn't working alone. He was part of a cell that specialized in psychological operations against American forces. What kind of psychological operations? Targeted harassment. They would research individual soldiers, learn about their families, their backgrounds, their fears. Then they'd use that information to break them down mentally during engagements. Marcus felt his chest tighten. How many soldiers? At least a dozen that we know of, maybe more. The theory is that they were trying to create a reputation, make American forces afraid to engage. If every firefight became a personal psychological attack, soldiers would become hesitant, ineffective. Did it work? Tommy was quiet for a moment. Some guys requested transfers. A few had complete breakdowns. One soldier from the 82nd Airborne went AWOL after his sniper told him his wife was cheating on him. Turned out to be true. She'd been posting pictures with her new boyfriend on Instagram. The implications were staggering. Marcus had been targeted not because of anything he'd done, but simply because he was a soldier with a social media presence and a personal life that could be weaponized against him. "Tommy, what if they're still watching? What if they have people here, in the States?" "Marcus, you're spiraling. Take a breath." But Marcus couldn't stop the thoughts from racing. Think about it. They had resources to research American soldiers, to coordinate psychological operations across multiple units. That's not just Taliban fighters. That's organized, funded, sophisticated. Okay, but even if that's true, what would be the point of continuing to target you now that you're out of the army? You're not a threat to them anymore. Marcus looked through the window at Sophia sleeping in her crib, her tiny chest rising and falling peacefully. Maybe it's not about me being a threat. Maybe it's about sending a message. Show other soldiers that even if you survive your deployment, even if you come home, the war follows you. Jesus, Marcus, you're scaring yourself with conspiracy theories. Am I? Or am I finally seeing the situation clearly? After ending the call with Tommy, Marcus spent the rest of the night researching online. He found articles about psychological warfare in modern conflicts, academic papers about social media intelligence gathering, and forum discussions among veterans who'd experienced similar encounters. By the time Sophia woke up for her early morning feeding, Marcus had filled a notebook with names, dates, and connections. He was beginning to see a pattern, and it terrified him. Eleanor found him at the kitchen table, surrounded by papers and empty coffee cups. "Marcus, what is all this?" "Research. About what happened to me in Afghanistan." She picked up one of the articles he'd printed out. "Social media as a tool for asymmetric warfare." "Marcus, this is—" She trailed off, reading. "This is really disturbing." "It's real, Elena. What happened to me wasn't random. I was targeted specifically, personally. But you're home now. You're safe." Marcus looked at his wife, holding their 3-day-old daughter, and realized that safety was an illusion he could no longer afford to believe in. Weimbai, the Dr. Sarah Chen's office at the VA Medical Center, was nothing like Marcus had expected. Instead of the sterile, institutional environment he'd imagined, it was warm and welcoming, with soft lighting, comfortable chairs, and framed photographs of peaceful landscapes. Dr. Chen herself was younger than Marcus had anticipated, probably in her early 30s, with shoulder-length black hair and an easy smile. "Thank you for coming in, Marcus. I know it's not easy to take time away from a newborn. Sophia's with Elena's mother today. They're both fine." Dr. Chen nodded, making a note on her clipboard. "Tell me about Sophia. How are you adjusting to fatherhood?" It was an unexpected question. Marcus had assumed they would start with his deployment, his injury, the nightmares. "She's perfect," he said, and meant it. 3 weeks old today. She has Elena's eyes and the strongest grip I've ever felt." "That must be an amazing feeling, being a new dad." "It is, but it's also—" Marcus paused, searching for the right words. "Terrifying. I never knew I could love someone so much, or worry about someone so much." "What specifically worries you about Sophia?" The question hit closer to home than Dr. Chen probably realized. Marcus had spent the past 3 weeks in a state of constant vigilance, checking on Sophia multiple times each night, researching every aspect of infant care, and imagining countless scenarios where something could go wrong. "Everything," he admitted. "SIDS, choking, accidents, but also—" He hesitated. "Also? I worry about keeping her safe from threats she doesn't even know exist." Dr. Chen set down her clipboard and leaned forward slightly. "What kind of threats, Marcus?" This was the moment Marcus had been dreading. How could he explain his suspicions without sounding paranoid or delusional? How could he make anyone understand the level of personal violation he'd experienced in that Afghan valley? "There's something I need to tell you about my deployment, about what happened when I got wounded." For the next hour, Marcus told Dr. Chen everything. The patrol to Kamar, the sniper who knew Elena's name, the photograph Tommy had found, his growing belief that he'd been targeted as part of a sophisticated psychological warfare campaign. Dr. Chen listened without interruption, occasionally taking notes, but mostly just giving him her full attention. When he finished, she was quiet for a long moment. "That's an incredibly traumatic experience, Marcus. Having an enemy demonstrate that level of personal knowledge about your life would be deeply unsettling for anyone." "Do you think I'm being paranoid?" "I think you're responding rationally to an irrational situation. The question is whether your response is still serving you, or whether it's starting to interfere with your ability to live your life." Marcus knew the answer to that question. His hypervigilance was exhausting Elena, making her feel like a prisoner in their own apartment. His constant checking and rechecking of locks and security measures was bordering on obsessive, and his inability to relax around Sophia was preventing him from fully bonding with his daughter. "How do I make it stop?" he asked. "First, we need to understand that what you're experiencing has a name: post-traumatic stress disorder. The hypervigilance, the sleep problems, the intrusive thoughts about potential threats, these are all normal responses to abnormal circumstances. Normal doesn't mean healthy. No, it doesn't. But understanding that your reactions are predictable and treatable is the first step toward healing." Dr. Chen opened a folder and pulled out several pamphlets. "I want to talk to you about a few different treatment approaches. Cognitive behavioral therapy can help you identify and change negative thought patterns. EMDR, eye movement, desensitization and reprocessing has shown excellent results for combat trauma. And there are medications that can help with anxiety and sleep." Marcus looked at the pamphlets without really seeing them. What about the real threat? What if I'm not being paranoid? What if there really are people who want to hurt my family? That's a valid concern. But Marcus, you can't live your life as if you're still in a combat zone. Your daughter needs a father who can hold her without scanning for threats. Your wife needs a husband who can sleep through the night without checking the locks 5 times. But what if the sun doesn't rise tomorrow? What if an asteroid hits the Earth? What if aliens invade Chicago? Dr. Chen's voice was gentle but firm. You can't protect your family from every possible threat, Marcus. You can only control your own actions and responses. They spent the rest of the session discussing practical strategies for managing anxiety and intrusive thoughts. Breathing exercises, grounding techniques, ways to challenge catastrophic thinking. Dr. Chen also gave Marcus a prescription for a mild anti-anxiety medication and sleeping pills. I want to see you twice a week for the next month, she said as the session ended. And Marcus, I want you to talk to Elena about everything we discussed today. PTSD doesn't just affect the person who has it, it affects the whole family. The drive home from the VA gave Marcus time to process the session. Dr. Chen hadn't dismissed his concerns or told him he was crazy, but she'd also made it clear that his current coping mechanisms weren't working. Something had to change. He found Elena in the nursery, changing Sophia's diaper while singing a Spanish lullaby her grandmother had taught her. The scene was so peaceful, so normal, that Marcus felt his chest tighten with emotion. How was your appointment? Elena asked without looking up. Good, I think. Doctor, Chen wants to see me twice a week for a while. That's good. What did you talk about? Marcus sat down in the rocking chair they'd bought at a garage sale, watching Elena dress Sophia in a tiny pink onesie with hearts on it. About us. About how my problems are affecting our family. Elena finished dressing Sophia and turned to face him, cradling their daughter against her chest. Marcus, I need to tell you something, and I don't want you to take it the wrong way. His stomach dropped. What? I'm scared of you sometimes. The words hit him like a physical blow. What do you mean? Not scared that you'll hurt me or Sophia. I know you'd never do that. But scared of the person you're becoming. You checked the locks so many times that I've started counting. You haven't had a full night's sleep since we brought Sophia home. You position yourself between us and every stranger we encounter, like you're expecting an attack. Elena sat down on the small love seat across from the rocking chair, still holding Sophia. Yesterday, when the mailman knocked on the door, you grabbed a kitchen knife before answering it. Marcus, he's been delivering mail to this building for 15 years. Mrs. Garcia downstairs talks to him every day about his grandchildren. Marcus had forgotten about the knife incident, which was somehow more disturbing than remembering it. I'm trying to keep you safe. From what? From the mailman, from the grocery store clerk, from your own family? Eleanor's voice was growing stronger, more determined. This isn't keeping us safe, Marcus. This is making us prisoners. Sophia started to fuss, and Eleanor automatically began rocking her gently. Dr. Chen said PTSD affects the whole family, Marcus said quietly. She's right, and I've been doing research too. There are support groups for military spouses, resources for families dealing with PTSD. Eleanor met his eyes. I love you, Marcus. I've loved you since that sociology class at DePaul when you fell asleep during the lecture on social stratification, but I won't raise our daughter in a house where her father treats every day like a combat mission. The ultimatum was unspoken but clear. Get help or lose his family. What do you need me to do? Marcus asked. I need you to trust Dr. Chen. I need you to take the medications if she thinks they'll help. And I need you to remember that we're not in Afghanistan. We're in Chicago in our home with people who love us. Marcus looked at his wife and daughter, sitting in the soft afternoon light filtering through the nursery window. They were the most important things in his world, worth more than his own life. If his broken mind was threatening their happiness, then he had to find a way to fix it. Okay, he said. I'll try. That's all I ask. That night, for the first time since bringing Sophia home, Marcus took one of the sleeping pills Dr. Chen had prescribed. As he drifted off to sleep beside Elena, he felt something he hadn't experienced in weeks, hope that tomorrow might be better than today. But in his dreams, he was back in the valley at Kamar, and the voice was calling down from the hills again, closer this time, as if the speaker was walking down from the rocks toward the village, toward Marcus, toward everything he held dear. Your war isn't over, Marcus Rivera. It's just beginning. 6 weeks into therapy with Dr. Chen, Marcus was learning to recognize the difference between real threats and PTSD-fueled paranoia. The breathing exercises helped when anxiety overwhelmed him. The medication took the sharp edge off his hypervigilance, and slowly, carefully, he was beginning to trust that his family could be safe in their Chicago apartment. Elena had joined him for several sessions, learning how to support his recovery without enabling his fears. Sophia, now 2 months old, had settled into a routine that allowed both parents to get enough sleep to function. For the first time since returning from Afghanistan, Marcus dared to believe that normal life might be possible. Then Tommy called with news that shattered his fragile peace. "Marcus, I need you to sit down for this," Tommy said without preamble. "What's wrong?" Marcus was holding Sophia while Elena made lunch, the picture of domestic tranquility. But something in Tommy's voice made his shoulders tense. "Remember that CID investigation into your incident at Kamar? They closed it last week. Officially, they concluded that the sniper used publicly available information to conduct psychological warfare. Case closed, no security breach. That's good news, right?" "It would be, except I kept digging on my own, called in some favors, talked to people who were actually there." Tommy paused. "Marcus, there was no Hamid Karzai." The words didn't register at first. "What do you mean?" "I mean the guy they said was your sniper, former Afghan National Army officer trained at Fort Benning. He doesn't exist. The name, the background story, the training records, all of it was fabricated." Marcus felt the room spinning slightly. He sat down heavily in the rocking chair, shifting Sophia to his good arm. "That's impossible. CID showed me the file." "Yeah, they showed me the same file. But I had a buddy who works military intelligence run the fingerprints they supposedly found at the scene. Nothing. No match in any database, military or civilian. The whole identity was created specifically for this case." "Why would CID create a fake suspect?" "That's the million-dollar question. Either they're incompetent or they're covering something up." Tommy's voice grew more serious. "Marcus, I think someone wanted this investigation to go away quietly. Someone with enough influence to manipulate a CID inquiry." Marcus looked at Eleanor, who was watching him with growing concern. He mouthed, "Tommy," and she nodded, but her expression remained worried. "What are you thinking?" Marcus asked into the phone. "I'm thinking we need to talk in person. Not over the phone, not at your apartment. Somewhere public but private, if you know what I mean." They agreed to meet at Lincoln Park Zoo the next afternoon. The location would allow them to talk freely while blending in with families and tourists, making surveillance difficult if anyone was monitoring their communications. That night, Marcus told Elena everything Tommy had revealed. Her reaction was swift and decisive. "We need to tell Dr. Chen about this immediately." "Why?" "Because for 6 weeks you've been working under the assumption that your paranoia was just PTSD. If there really is a cover-up, if someone really is watching you, then your instincts weren't wrong. They were protecting us." It was a disturbing thought. Marcus had been working so hard to convince himself that the threats weren't real, that his hypervigilance was unnecessary. What if he'd been right all along? The next afternoon, Marcus met Tommy near the Great Ape House, where the sounds of families enjoying the zoo would mask their conversation. Tommy looked thinner than before, more haggard, and he kept glancing around as if expecting to be followed. "You look like hell," Marcus observed. "I haven't been sleeping much since I started digging into this." "Marcus, what I'm about to tell you is going to sound crazy, but I need you to hear me out." They found a bench facing the penguin exhibit, positioning themselves where they could see anyone approaching from multiple directions. "The night you got shot, there were actually 2 sniper positions in those hills," Tommy began. "The one that engaged us during the firefight, and another one about 200 meters away that never fired a shot." "How do you know that?" "Because I went back. 2 weeks ago, I flew back to Afghanistan on my own dime and hiked up to those coordinates." Tommy pulled out his phone and showed Marcus a series of photographs. "Look at this." The images showed a carefully constructed sniper nest with clear lines of sight to the village below. But unlike a typical fighting position, this one appeared designed for observation rather than combat. Professional surveillance equipment, high-end optics, communication gear that's way beyond anything the Taliban usually has access to, Tommy explained. This wasn't a random sniper attack, Marcus. It was a staged event. Staged by who? That's where it gets really weird. I found serial numbers on some of the equipment. When I traced them, they led back to a private military contractor called Blackstone Tactical. The name meant nothing to Marcus, but Tommy's expression suggested it should. Blackstone is a security firm that does contract work for the Department of Defense, CIA, and other agencies. They specialize in what they call psychological operations consulting. Marcus felt his blood pressure rising. You're saying American contractors shot me? I'm saying American contractors orchestrated a scenario designed to make you believe you'd been targeted by enemy forces with impossible intelligence capabilities. The question is why? A family with young children walked past their bench, the kids excitedly pointing at the penguins. The normalcy of the scene felt surreal given the conversation they were having. Tommy, this is insane. Why would anyone want to do that to me specifically? I don't think it was specifically about you. I think you were just unlucky enough to be selected for some kind of experimental program. Tommy showed him more photos on his phone. I found evidence of at least 6 similar incidents across different bases, different units. Each time a soldier near the end of their deployment gets targeted with personalized psychological warfare, gets wounded, and comes home with severe PTSD. To what end? Think about it. What's the biggest problem the military faces with combat veterans? PTSD, suicide, adjustment disorders. What if someone wanted to study those problems in a controlled environment? What if they needed test subjects who would experience severe, specific trauma that could be monitored and analyzed? The implications were horrifying. Marcus thought about all the therapy sessions, the medications, the detailed questionnaires about his symptoms and progress. Had he been a lab rat this entire time? Dr. Chen, he said quietly. What about her? She knew things. Details about my deployment that weren't in my official records. She asked very specific questions about my reactions to the sniper. What if... Marcus couldn't finish the thought. What if she's part of it? Tommy nodded grimly. It's possible. A lot of VA psychologists do consulting work for military research programs. Marcus felt like everything solid in his world was crumbling. His therapy, his recovery, his growing sense of normalcy. What if all of it was part of some elaborate experiment? We need proof, he said finally. I've got more than proof. I've got names, dates, financial records showing payments from Blackstone to various individuals, including... Tommy stopped abruptly, his eyes fixed on something behind Marcus. What? Don't turn around. There's a guy in a grey jacket who's been following us since the Ape House. He's trying to look casual, but he's definitely surveillance. Marcus's military training kicked in automatically. Without appearing to look, he used reflective surfaces to identify their watcher, a middle-aged man with short hair and the bearing of ex-military, pretending to read zoo information plaques while keeping them in his peripheral vision. How do you want to play this? Marcus asked quietly. We split up. You head toward the parking lot. I'll go toward the Lincoln Park entrance. If he follows one of us, we'll know for sure. They stood up casually, Tommy heading north while Marcus walked south with Sophia's stroller. After 2 minutes, Marcus checked his phone and saw a text from Tommy. He's with you. Grey jacket 20 meters back. Marcus felt a familiar surge of adrenaline, but this time it wasn't paranoia. It was confirmation that everything Tommy had discovered was real. He was being watched, monitored, possibly by the same people who had orchestrated his wounding in Afghanistan. He took a circuitous route through the zoo, using the crowds and exhibits as cover, while confirming that Grey Jacket was definitely following him. At the Children's Farm exhibit, he pulled out his phone and called Elena. Honey, I need you to pack a bag for you and Sophia, just essentials. Don't make it obvious, but be ready to leave the apartment quickly. Marcus, you're scaring me. What's happening? I'll explain when I get home, just trust me, okay? And Elena, call your parents, tell them you might need to stay with them for a few days. After hanging up, Marcus continued his evasive route through the zoo. Grey Jacket was still there, maintaining professional distance but clearly experienced in surveillance. At the reptile house, Marcus ducked into the men's restroom and called Tommy. I've confirmed the tale. What's our next move? We need to get you and your family somewhere safe while we figure out how deep this goes. And Marcus, don't trust anyone connected to your treatment. If this is as big as I think it is, they've got people everywhere. As Marcus left the zoo, he realized that his months of paranoia and hypervigilance hadn't been symptoms of PTSD. They'd been his subconscious mind recognizing a real threat that his conscious mind had been trained to dismiss. The war hadn't followed him home from Afghanistan. It had been waiting for him here all along, hidden behind friendly faces and helping hands, orchestrated by people who saw him not as a hero returning from service to his country, but as a test subject whose suffering could advance their understanding of human psychology. Now he had to figure out how to protect his family from an enemy that wore the uniform of the very country he'd sworn to defend. Toesti Saumag, the safe house, was a modest ranch home in Schaumburg, 30 miles northwest of Chicago, owned by one of Tommy's veteran friends who worked private security. Marcus, Eleanor, and Sophia had been there for 3 days, while Tommy worked his contacts to gather more intelligence about the scope of the conspiracy they'd uncovered. Eleanor was holding up better than Marcus had expected. After the initial shock of learning that her husband's paranoia had been justified, she'd shifted into protective mode, focused entirely on keeping Sophia safe and supporting Marcus as he processed the revelation that his entire recovery process had been compromised. "Any word from Tommy?" she asked as Marcus finished checking the perimeter for the 3rd time that morning. "He's meeting with a journalist from the Tribune today. Someone who specializes in investigative pieces about military contractors. The plan was to go public, with everything Tommy had discovered, but they needed more than just his word and some photographs. They needed documented proof of the conspiracy, and that meant taking significant risks." Marcus's phone buzzed with an encrypted message from Tommy. "Meet me at the Starbucks on Gulf Road at 2 p.m. Come alone. Important developments." At exactly 2 p.m., Marcus walked into the coffee shop and found Tommy sitting at a corner table, looking more relaxed than he had in days. That should have been Marcus's first warning. "How did it go with the reporter?" Marcus asked, sliding into the opposite chair. "Really well, actually. She's very interested in the story." Tommy smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Marcus, I need you to come with me to meet with some people who can help us." "What people?" "Federal investigators. They've been tracking Blackstone Tactical for months, looking into allegations of unethical human experimentation. Your case could be the key to bringing down the entire operation." Something felt wrong. Tommy was using different speech patterns, more formal language than his usual casual tone, and he kept glancing at his watch as if operating on a schedule. "Where are these investigators?" Marcus asked. "Close by. We can drive over together." Tommy stood up. "Marcus, this is our chance to get justice for what they did to you, to all of us." As they walked toward the parking lot, Marcus noticed 2 things simultaneously. Tommy was leading him toward a black SUV with tinted windows instead of his own car, and Grey Jacket from the zoo was sitting in a sedan across the street. "Tommy," Marcus said quietly, stopping in his tracks. "What's wrong?" Marcus looked at his best friend since childhood, the man who'd shared foxholes and fears with him, who'd been the best man at his wedding. "How much did they pay you?" Tommy's face crumbled. "Marcus, please. They have pictures of my sister. They know where my parents live. They said if I didn't cooperate—" "How long?" Marcus demanded. "Since Walter Reed. They approached me when you were in recovery. Said they needed someone to monitor your adjustment, report on your progress." Tears were running down Tommy's face now. "I never thought they'd hurt you. I thought it was just research, trying to help veterans." The black SUV's doors opened and 2 men in suits got out. Not federal investigators, contractors based on their bearing and the professional way they approached. Marcus had 2 choices: run and spend the rest of his life looking over his shoulder, or face whatever these people wanted and try to end this once and for all. "Tommy, when they ask you to write your report, tell them I said this: some battles are worth fighting, even when you can't win." Then Marcus turned and walked toward the men from the SUV. "Mr. Rivera, we'd like to talk with you," the taller man said. His accent was educated, East Coast, probably Ivy League. "I'm listening." "Not here. Somewhere more private." "Am I under arrest?" "Nothing like that. Think of this as a consultation." The SUV was luxurious inside, with leather seats and tinted windows that made it impossible to see out. They drove for about 20 minutes before pulling into the underground garage of a downtown office building. Marcus was escorted to an elevator, then to a conference room on the 15th floor with a spectacular view of Lake Michigan. A woman in her 50s was waiting for them, professionally dressed with silver hair and the kind of presence that suggested she was used to being the smartest person in any room. "Mr. Rivera, thank you for coming. I'm Dr. Patricia Westbrook, Director of Psychological Research for Blackstone Tactical, the people who had me shot, the people who created a controlled environment to study combat stress reactions under specific conditions," she corrected. "Your case has provided invaluable data about PTSD development and treatment efficacy." Marcus fought to keep his voice steady. "You used me as a lab rat." We created an opportunity to study trauma response in a way that's impossible under normal circumstances. Do you have any idea how difficult it is to get pure data about combat PTSD? Usually, soldiers experience multiple traumas, varying degrees of injury, different support systems. Your case was unique, a single, clearly defined traumatic event with controlled follow-up treatment. What about Dr. Chen? Dr. Chen is one of our most talented researchers. Her therapy methods have shown remarkable promise for treating combat veterans. Your progress under her care has exceeded our best projections. Marcus realized that even his recovery had been part of their experiment. Every breakthrough in therapy, every step forward in healing, had been monitored and analyzed. What do you want from me now? Your continued cooperation. We're prepared to offer you a very generous compensation package, enough to ensure your family's financial security for life. In exchange, you continue your treatment with Dr. Chen and participate in periodic evaluations. And if I refuse? Dr. Westbrook's expression didn't change. Mr. Rivera, you've been diagnosed with PTSD by a qualified psychiatrist. You've exhibited paranoid behavior, made unfounded accusations against government contractors, and shown signs of increasing instability. If necessary, we can have you committed for psychiatric evaluation. Your wife and daughter would be provided for, of course, but your role as husband and father would be limited. The threat was clear: cooperate or lose his family. How do I know you won't just eliminate me once your research is complete? Because dead subjects provide no longitudinal data. We're interested in studying your adaptation to civilian life over years, possibly decades. You're much more valuable to us alive and functional. Marcus thought about Elena and Sophia waiting at the safe house, about the life they were trying to build together, about all the other veterans who might be targeted for similar experimentation. I want to see the research, he said finally. Excuse me, if I'm going to be part of this, I want to understand what you're learning. I want to see how my suffering is contributing to helping other veterans. Dr. Westbrook considered this. That's unusual, but not unreasonable. Very well. Dr. Chen can share appropriate portions of the research data with you. And I want guarantees about my family's safety. Of course, as long as you continue to cooperate, neither your wife nor your daughter will be involved in any way. Marcus nodded slowly. One more condition. Tommy Walsh is off limits. He's been through enough. Agreed. As they drove him back to collect his car, Marcus stared out at the Chicago skyline and realized that his war really wasn't over. It was just changing form. But maybe, if he played this right, he could turn his victimization into something resembling victory. He thought about Elena and Sophia, about the life they deserved to have together. He thought about all the other veterans who might be targeted by Blackstone's researchers, and he thought about the fact that sometimes the greatest act of courage isn't charging into battle, it's choosing to survive and fight another day. When he got back to the safe house, Eleanor was waiting with Sophia in her arms and questions in her eyes. It's over, he told her, which was both completely true and entirely false. We can go home. As he held his wife and daughter, Marcus began planning his real mission, learning everything he could about Blackstone's research, building a case that couldn't be dismissed or covered up, and finding a way to expose the truth without losing the family he'd fought so hard to protect. The war had followed him home, just as the sniper had promised. But Marcus Rivera was still a soldier, and soldiers adapt, survive, and ultimately find a way to complete their mission, even when that mission is fighting the very people they once served.